Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world right now. I am blessed to be or have the presence of Sue Plumtree, who is a rock star when it comes to relationships. Um, and I wanted to take this opportunity to give Sue about 60 seconds just to do a bit of an introduction as to why relationships and choosing the right partner or finding the right partner is such an important thing, and how that potentially may even apply to whether it's personal or business.
Well, the one I'm thinking about in this case is personal. And it's so important, especially if you're after a committed relationship, because you don't want to decide you made a mistake, only after a few months or even after a couple of years. So you might as well get it right first time.
So, Sue, you come from experience here.
Yeah.
So, can you give people a little bit, as we go into this discussion, a little bit of insight as to what that experience is and how you have become so passionate about sharing about this topic?
Are you talking about relationships in general or finding the right partner?
Let's see if you can do a combination of both.
Okay. Um, I'm passionate about relationships because I got it so wrong first time around. So wrong. But that's a different story. Um, and because I got it so very right this time around. And that is what I want to share. Because at first I wondered whether it's a fluke that, and it's just me, but it isn't. And I know how I managed to recognize Dave to be the wonderful partner, husband that he is. I'm very, can you edit
It's
it out?
it's all good. Go and go. Do you want to go
I'm,
and So, folks, we are live. Sue has got a phone call, and this is the beauty of live. You just never know what's going to happen or how it's going to happen. So, while we wait for Sue to return to the screen, I thought I would, do some improv and just mention the fact that I started working with Sue about a year and a bit ago, and for me, it was more about relationships, both personal and business, because I felt I needed to get rid of some of my negative belief systems, because as business owners we often we have that imposter syndrome. So for me, this was one of those things that I was able to overcome a lot of that quite quickly. So as Sue gets back in her seat, and gets back on and hits the unmute button, and we have a glasses change. This is all live. Excellent stuff. So, Sue, let's get the discussion started. I hope we are ready to rumble now. And let's get into this whole thing about finding the right partner. Now, I guess that can start anywhere. It can start if you currently don't have a partner. Or it can be a realization that you are with the wrong partner, and therefore need to find the right one. I mean, what are your suggestions? Typically, where do you start? You need to hit the unmute button, Sue. Let me just, there we go. We just need to get you to unmute. There we go. We can now hear your voice. There we go.
Okay. In the context of this conversation, I'd like to focus on finding the right partner if you're single or divorced or but ready for a new commitment in this context.
Yeah.
When a couple of years after I left my marriage, I enrolled on a little course about how to find the right partner. And what I discovered is that it's impossible to find the right partner unless you know yourself really well. And so everything that I know about finding the right partner is getting to know yourself, finding out not only what matters to you, what it takes to feel loved in a relationship, but so much more. So, for example, you ask somebody what kind of person they're looking for, and they'll say, well, top of the list, somebody who's kind. But kind is very generic. So how will you know if somebody is actually being kind? The only way to know it, because they might be kind to you, but they're trying to impress you. So you need to observe them in action, how they treat other people, how they talk about other people. That is the evidence, because a person who is kind is not just kind to one person, but that is nature. So he's kind to everybody. So you need, the problem with when you're meeting somebody that you really like is pheromones. That is a big problem. And then all your common sense goes out of the window.
and that's an interesting one, because as you say, the pheromones kick in the beginning. But what happens? I'd like to get to this a bit later, but how do you hold on to that so that when you're in the right relationship with the right partner, you can still have those pheromones active, as those butterflies, all that kind of stuff. So we'll get to that when you're ready to cover that.
Okay. But generally speaking, when you first meet somebody and you like their looks and you like the first things that they say, you still have your brain. and it's a time to get to know one another.
Yeah.
So first you have to know yourself. And then you also have to know the things that matter to that person so that the two coincide. So very often you find the person that ticks all your boxes, but you don't tick theirs. Or they do, but they're not ready for commitment.
Yeah.
So you need to know a lot of these things in advance. And it takes time, it takes various conversations and a lot of attention.
So, where do you get, like, you say get to know these things in advance, but how do you get to know that in advance? What do you mean by that? Like before you even speak to them,
Oh, no,
or
no,
once
no.
you get to know them, or how does that work?
But the way it's the advanced bit is to get to know yourself. So you have to know your needs. You need to know the non-negotiables in a relationship. You need to know that in advance. Very often in a relationship, somebody says something, you get upset, and you didn't even know why, and then you get triggered, and the other person said, "What did I say?" Because you carry a lot of baggage that hasn't been resolved.
I was
So
going to ask about that. Yeah.
that's really important, that you heal your wounds, because if you have been left in a relationship, or even if you left a relationship, as I have, I grieved for a very long time, thinking I failed my marriage, and I did contribute to the failure, and that is important to know. That Bill wasn't all to blame, because we co-create a relationship. We both bring stuff. So it would be really helpful for you to heal your wounds first, because if you don't, you will get triggered. And
And
your poor partner won't even know what they said.
well, this is such an important thing, and I find that this is important both in personal relationships and in business. When you looking at partnerships, is realizing that everybody comes with baggage along the way. So personal experiences that there's no way in the world you can know about everything, and they contribute to how we make decisions. And
Indeed.
and that's a really powerful thing to just take time to realize that that person is going to have different makeup and baggage to what you have, and therefore both of you can look at the same scenario and have totally different opinions, even though it's exactly the same thing. And that's the same with in business, when a business partners have an argument, or decide on different ways to go with the business, is both people are looking at the same picture but seeing different aspects of it.
Yes. And that's because you will have different dreams and aspirations as to, for example, which direction do you want the business to go?
Yeah,
and how you want
absolutely.
to operate. And so you need to know in business, especially, partnerships or companies, you need to know your values. So the things that matter to you. You need to know, for example, how you feel about money. Are you a spender? Are you a saver? It's one of the top reasons people fight. So you need to know, A, how you like it, B, how they like it.
And I guess this is where the danger of assumption can be quite damaging.
Say that again. The
The
danger
danger
of
of assumption, because
assumptions.
assuming,
Oh,
yeah,
absolutely. A couple of years after I left my marriage, I decided to try online dating. And I remember the very first date I ever had. I had such a good time. It turned out, because it was the novelty. It turned out afterwards, looking back, I was having a good time with myself. The poor guy, the poor guy was just tagging along. The relationship didn't last at all once we actually looked at each other. So no, but that first time it was fun. I was the first time I'd been out with somebody. I was flirting, something I'd never did. It was just great fun. But so you need so you need to be prepared for a date, actually, and expectations. It's assumptions and expectations. And often the expectations are, tonight I'm going to meet the one. Oh my God, this is so exciting. A little bit like West Side Story, but it isn't. Your expectation should be, I'm going to have a nice time with somebody I enjoy. We're going to learn about each other and see where it takes us, and be relaxed about this. But you need to, if there are any red flags coming up, please listen, don't dismiss them. And also, don't ever think that you can change anybody. You cannot ever change anybody else.
it's
So,
amazing how many relationships start like that, where people
oh,
go, "Oh, you
sweetie,
know what? I can fix that."
look at me, from day one. So don't. You're not the right woman who can making him the better man, for
Oh,
example.
so I'm going to ask this question, Sue, because I'm sure somebody is thinking it, or somebody's watching this and going, "Well, where the word compromise."
Compromise is a good idea. So, for example, say that you have a range of, and the need to, I don't know, go out every night. And they have the need to stay home every night. If you are at either side of the continuum, the chances of coming together will be remote. But if you don't mind either way, and there is a gap that is fairly small, then you can compromise and negotiate. Things that are important to you, do not negotiate. When I say important, I mean the non-negotiables. Because of course you have to compromise in relationships, but not when it truly, truly matters, which is where your values come in. If they compromise your values and your deep beliefs, then you can't compromise, which is why, A, you need to know what they are in advance, and B, you need to know what theirs are.
And so when it comes to knowing what theirs are and what yours are, um, is it something that you just go and say, hey, let's sit down, let's discuss this, let's have a conversation about it?
No,
Or what? So talk to us. Like, how would you handle
it's
the situation? How would you cover that?
it's part of getting to know one another. If you find, for example, here's a red flag. You've been meeting fairly regularly over, I don't know, a few weeks, never weekends. Why not? Do they have another relationship? Are they married? They're pretending not to be. So they never introduce you to their friends. Does it mean that they don't want to be committed? What does it mean? And if it happens many times and it begins to bother you, you say, I noticed that I would love to meet your friends. How do you feel about that? And see what they say. If they make excuses, then maybe there's a red flag somewhere. You don't have to confront them about this. It's something to observe.
Yeah, you don't have to get a private investigator to go and follow them, as an example. I
You
watch
know,
too much TV.
some people would do that, and I would so discourage you from doing that.
So
Whether you are already deep in a relationship or not, don't ever do that, because it's only an expression of your distrust and suspicion, and that has no place in a loving relationship.
and it's interesting because Sue, I find I come from a fairly colorful background where my mum and dad, bless them, in their final years, loved each other like nobody else I've ever seen. But growing up, my parents were married and divorced to each other 3 times, and that's a whole story on its own.
Wow.
But I remember, when you were talking about making sure that you understand each other's, beliefs and understand each other's, wants and needs. Um, and I just feel I need to share this very simple example. And many years ago, I flew back home, and my parents were at a point where they were looking at reconciling and getting back together. And we sat there, and as an example, my mum, she just wanted flowers. She just wanted to be acknowledged. And I said to my dad, I was like, what's the big deal? Like, why can't you just buy a flower? And he was like, but I told her I love her when I married her. Like, what's the, like, nothing's changed. I'll let her know. And I was like, oh. And for me, there was like a light bulb moment, how in relationships people have different perceptions based on their own upbringing and what things that happen. So and a few years later, I was speaking to somebody who was having relationship trouble, and I was asking, like, what's the problem? She goes, well, my dad taught me that a gentleman always opens the car door for a woman. And I was like, okay. And she goes, and this guy that I'm seeing, he's never opened the door. He doesn't care about me. And I thought, wow, okay. So her perception of love was based on a simple act that she wasn't seeing.
Mm,
And this is where so many relationships go wrong, because they are trying to put it up against a different template that doesn't necessarily fit their own.
mm,
And so people that watch a lot of romantic films and movies might get a perception of what love looks like, or what relationships should be like. And
mm.
then reality kicks in, but the two don't marry up, so therefore they think there's something wrong, and therefore the friction. So how do you deal with that?
Do you know, I think movies have a lot to answer for. A lot to answer for. You can't, I don't know how, unless I get my hands on them and I'm shaking them and saying, this is not realistic. But you know what you just reminded me of? My first husband, Bill, and I, turned out he did love me, but not in the way I needed to be loved. And the same applied to him.
That's such a
And I only
strong message.
discovered that years after we parted. So I didn't know in advance what I needed. I never was able even to tell him. But by then, I felt so resentful that I wasn't able to give him what he needed. And I just think that's a tragedy. That's why we need to know ourselves really well. What does it take for us to feel loved? I know exactly what I need. And luckily, well, not luckily, because I knew that he was that kind of man, his needs are similar to mine. And sometimes we will sit together and we are holding hands. And I say to him, isn't it lucky that you two want to hold hands when I want to hold hands? Because you might say, stop crawling all over me.
Yeah.
He might have. But that's why you need to know in advance what you need and what they are able to give.
And this is where communication, I guess, comes massively into the mix, hey Sue, because a lot of people, they or I mean, what would you say from your experience working with people? Because this is what you do for a living. You work with people and help them build, and mend relationships, or gain confidence within themselves and overcome certain limiting beliefs and all the rest of it.
Mm-hmm.
What is your experience when it comes to dealing with individuals? Do you find it's the communication side of things where it's not open enough, that people don't express what they themselves need within a relationship?
Yes, that's absolutely true. For various reasons. Some are subtle, such as they don't believe they are worthy of getting what they need. That's one. Sometimes they don't know what they actually need. They know what they don't want. So they're not able to express it, which is again why you need to know yourself. The next one has to do with asking for what you need in a way that doesn't sound critical. Like, we never go out, or you always are on the phone to your mates, or that's not asking for what you need. But I'd love to spend more time together, would be great, for example. Or how about we arrange to go out next week? Would that be okay? So being direct, but asking is a skill. How to express it in such a way that your partner doesn't feel criticized.
And that's something that, and this is something I just want to give people as an example from working with you, Sue, is one of the things that I found is, especially when you're working all the time and you're putting all this positive energy into what you're doing, a lot of the time this happens across all relationships, where very often we take out our frustrations on those closest to us, because you'll never go and have a fight with your perfect client or your boss, or you're not going to take those things out, so you end up taking that out at home.
Mm.
And for me, I needed to learn how to change my language and my frustration to find a different outlet for it, so that I wasn't coming home and feeling frustrated with something happening at work, and that my wife or my children sit there and thinking, no, he's home, what a pain. um, and little things like that. So but that's getting to know yourself, and that's one of the things I've learned from you, is being, not many people know themselves because they're so busy doing and reacting that they don't take time to just be and look at what's important to them, and
Yeah.
therefore how they respond to things. So what are your suggestions around that, Sue?
Well, one of you, and usually the one who notices, will say, wait a minute, I know you've had a bad day. Don't shout at me. Tell me about your day and I'll listen. But don't shout at me. I know you're frustrated. So rather than attacking them and then going on the counterattack, and it escalates. Uh, if because you have to take the initiative. You can't expect them to become enlightened and stop being irritable with you. But you can do either one of two things. You can retreat if that's what feels okay, but I don't think that would help, because your husband or your partner will carry that anger and resentment within, and he needs to let it out somehow. But and the best way to do it is to let them dump, and you listen, not dump on you, just dump. I had a terrible day. I was talking to the guy, they wouldn't listen, they weren't, and then, but you always will have to be empathetic. That isn't easy when you feel a little bit anxious. But the point being, you always have to be on your husband's side. Don't go, well, what did you do to get him so angry then?
But I think that works in both directions, though. No, the husband always needs to be on the wife's side too, or your partner.
Oh yeah, it always does, but you don't have control over that. You only have control over your actions.
Correct.
Your thoughts, your feelings, your beliefs are in your control. Nothing else is. But what you can do is create an environment where your partner can respond in a more positive way. Give them the space to let it out. Because actually, it also has a detrimental effect on their health. Holding in anger and resentment and stress is bad for your heart, for your blood pressure, for all kinds of conditions. So, if you care about your partner, give them the chance to let it out, but in a positive way, and you listen. That's the
So
hardest bit.
it is. It's interesting because we talk about and this at the end of the day we're human beings, so these things apply both in business and in personal. And when we look at those things, because I've seen businesses break down, especially family businesses as an example, because that's like double the boil, if that makes sense, because
it does.
now you have that. You go home and guess what? The business is still there because it's still family. So you just never leave. But with those understanding those differences, and this might make you laugh, but my wife and a lot of my friends and family at one stage turned around and went, "I'm the woman in the relationship in our marriage." And I was like, "What do you mean?" And my wife was like, "Well, you the one that does the cooking and the cleaning and you have so many words to get rid of, because like most people say, oh, women have so many X amount of words that they have to get out of their system in a day, and men not so much." And for us, it's the opposite. So I started realizing that my wife would come home and I would just dump, because I'm excited. I love what I do, so I tell her about all the things that and then by the time and she deals with some really hardcore, really tough situations in her work, but then she was exhausted just from listening to me and not having the opportunity to actually have an outlet herself by the end of it, because she just actually wanted silence, just to kind of breathe and take some time out. And so when it comes to that, what is the best way in a partnership to kind of work out who needs to let out and when? Because sometimes you can have two very high powered jobs and people both needing an outlet, but timing not allowing for it. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, the first one is timing. So if you start dumping on her the minute you get through the door, not a good time. So and you don't have to ask. You know your partner. Let them unwind. So if you're the one at home and they come in and you see that they're stressed, allow them to unwind. I tell you what, how about a glass of wine? And then maybe after dinner, I'd love to tell you about my day. How does it work for you? There are times, one of the problems, if there is a problem, with my wonderful husband, Dave, is that I'm wide awake early in the morning and he takes hours to wake up. So if I want to say anything to him that requires any thought, anything I want to share to remind him something to do, forget it. So just because I'm eager to come out, I know it doesn't work. He won't hear it. It just overloads him. So I know to wait. So this is know your partner. You know when they are most receptive.
And I think, what you've covered so far, Sue, and I'm just thinking about relationships in general, because, with your experience as an example where you personally went through a very long relationship before you found that.
37 years, darling.
And you know and we always hear the saying of, life's too short, and a lot of the time, people go into relationships, or they find partners because they need company, as an example. So, they'll find somebody that's, potentially available and company at the time, but they don't tick all the boxes, but they don't want to be alone either. um, I guess, having these discussions really early on are because it can potentially develop really amazing friendships, even if you find that you are, not compatible as partners, but you could end up becoming really good friends because of the fact that you're having
Absolutely.
real conversations. And having those conversations early on about what, is it advisable, as an example, with a new potential partner, to say, hey, well, I tell you what, can you, what is your perfect uh, partner, or marriage partner, or life partner? What are their values, what are their characteristics, and actually have that discussion early on.
I don't think it's very useful, actually,
Okay, talk to me
because
why.
it's a little bit like a job interview where you say, what would you do if a fire broke out? And you say, well, I would ring a
Run
whistle.
like
I
hell.
will get everybody out, in perfect order, and get. When the reality strikes and there is a fire, panic. So the reality is completely different from whatever they imagine how they would react in a given situation. So I don't think that's very useful. But that's why you need to see how they behave in general. You can ask them what went wrong in your last marriage, what happened. And if they start saying, she was a bitch, she did this, she did that, she did the other, ooh, you know, not a good sign, serious red flag, you know. But if we just grew apart, we wanted different things, that's honest. And then you can say, well, what is it that you wanted that you didn't get in your marriage? So it's that kind of conversation.
And I love the fact that you brought that up, because I specifically wanted to put it out there to help people realize that what people, especially in the early days, you spoke about the pheromones and all those kind of things, and at the end of the day, it's one of the most bizarre things when it comes to human relationships. And it's the same in business, where people tell you exactly what they want you to hear, but their actions are different. And you've pointed out that we should, go and see how they respond in certain reactions and what they do. So look at those behaviors rather than what they say. And that's, I think, one of the, I don't know what your thoughts are, but it's one of the big mistakes we make, because our minds aren't, when all the pheromones and everything else are going, and you've got all the butterflies and everything else, a lot of the time you don't hear or see the the flags, as you put it. So
Yes.
what can people do, to overcome that? Because I look at my teenage girls now, and they, meeting boys, and I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh, they're going to go through all this stuff. And, I'm so glad I'm married, and I love my wife, and I don't have to go through all these things again. But it's like, it's a complicated world that people now live in.
Well, the first thing is you can't teach anybody everything. And sometimes people will make mistakes. And sometimes a mistake is believing they know what they want. So let me give you a business example. Okay, so you have a job and you do it really well. You like your colleagues, you like your boss, you like your work. and the pay isn't brilliant. It's near home, so that's that. But you would like to earn more money, have more freedom, and there is an advertisement for exactly the same kind of job, and you apply for it, and they love you, and they pay you twice as much, and you go for it because who wouldn't? The problem is that it's much further away from your home. They expect a pound of flesh for the kind of salary they pay you. So you have to work long hours. So you thought you got what you wanted, but there are consequences that you hadn't considered. So if you want somebody who's hugely successful, then don't be surprised if they are a workaholic, for example, and complain that he's never home. If you want a woman who is, um, a good potential to be a mom, don't be too surprised if then they become rather limited in their worldly outlook when you are a high flyer and you want somebody interesting on your arm. So you have to know what it is that you really want and the downsides. So, okay, I want a mom who is great with the children, who looks after me, looks after the home. And there are many women like that. And I think that's a fantastic job. But don't expect them to have scintillating conversations.
I think this is, again, Sue, every time I speak to you, you bring up you just make life sound so simple. And, in reality, it is when you have the right information, I believe. And, what you just went through now is so important, because what you mentioned earlier as an example, where one partner wants to stay in and the other one wants to go out. Now, as an example, if you've got this high flyer that's working, internationally, they're flying all over the place, they come home, they are own, and I know I've spent a lot of time flying all over the place, living out of suitcases, being in hotels, and then coming back, and it all sounds glamorous, but the only thing you want is when you come home is to just be home,
And
and everybody else wants to go away, and you're like, well, no, I just want to I just want to sit in my backyard and have enjoy the sun, or
yeah,
little things like that. So just reinforcing what you said there, by making sure that you discuss these things, and understand that there will be a compromise, as it were. And if you that person who loves going out, is make sure that you've expressed that to the other half and say, hey,
mm,
you know what, I love going out, I understand. And you have to be able to see it from their point of view as well, is that okay, you're not prepared to go out every day, and understand that, but can we have once a week that we go out, and then be very clear on what kind of experiences you're looking for.
mm, yeah.
Does that, like, what else would you recommend around finding those compromises and understanding, because it's difficult to sometimes see from another person's point of view until you actually walk in their shoes. So how do
Yeah.
you what's the best way to communicate that?
Well, I think the only example that I can give you is mine. So when I first met Dave, I told him about my coaching practice and how much it matters to me and how wonderful it was and rewarding it was and all that kind of thing. So that there are no surprises that I spend time, even when he's here, I might be in a conversation with somebody. I might be having a coaching session with somebody. And he understands that. There are no surprises. So he goes off and does his own thing. And then, we have lunch together and then it's our time. So knowing what matters to the other person and not wanting to change them. Well, I'm here. We don't get to see each other during the week. Why do you have to do so? Why no. They knew it coming in.
Absolutely.
So the conversation would be, look, what is it that you need? Because I really love you with all my heart, but I have to do this. It's only an hour. And then after that, let's have a break and let's hold hands for a little while. And then we can both go back to work. So we have that kind of break where we focus on one another, and then we go back to doing what we were doing before.
It's that little bit of that quality time, and this is the thing that I've learned over the years, is how you can very easily live past each other, because you both have your own professional lives and your potentially friend circles and everything else that happens, and just that quality time. It's amazing what even 5 or 10 minutes can do to a relationship.
Yeah.
But it's also amazing how it can break it down if you don't allow for that.
Exactly. Then you can feel neglected and unimportant.
Yeah, absolutely. Sue, I'm conscious of time. We've been talking for 40 minutes already. Wow. It's supposed to be 30 to 35 minutes, but hey. So Sue, thank you so much again for just sharing from your heart and your experiences. I really do urge people to reach out to you and at least just have a virtual coffee with you and have a discussion around whether it be business or personal relationships. Sue's an incredible
relationships
listener.
In general.
Yeah.
But the one thing I do that might be of interest is I offer a free coaching session. And
so, and can they find that on, where can they get hold of you for that, Sue?
On LinkedIn would be good. All my contact details are there.
Excellent
and
stuff.
It's absolutely no obligation, no strings attached.
So, I would grab that with both hands, because one of the things that I realized from working with Sue is Sue will sit there and you can see she's listening. And then at the end of it, when you finish talking, she'll go, okay, so you mentioned this, 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 and this. She sees through the BS, which for me was great. But she's really practical and really thinks things through. And her coaching style is supportive, but firm, should I say, because at the end of the day, she wants to get the best results for you. And for me, it's been incredible to work with her. And I recommend, anybody, whether it be, a work relationship or a personal relationship, or you just wanting to find that magic. I mean, if you look at how Sue talks about Dave, that's, I think, what everybody wants in the world. I mean, that's like the cream on top. That's awesome. And I think we can all aspire to that, and Sue can show us how. So, Sue, thank you again so much for sharing. And then, people, please go and check out Sue Plumtree on LinkedIn, and you'll see her different company pages on there as well. This one, there's a little sign just to her side over there, which is True You. Please go and follow her company page.
True You.
So
embrace it through you.
So go and follow her company page. But if you go to her profile, you'll find it over there, and then you can go and follow that as well and see updates and events that Sue runs. So, Sue, much appreciated. Thank you very much.
By the way, you might like to know, I'm running an event. I'm running a free half hour on the 30th of July at 11 for half an hour. It's about setting up your personal boundaries.
Ooh, that's
that is the number one skill for happy relationships.
Sure. So that's and that's on. Can they? I guess they can find that on your LinkedIn.
This afternoon, events on LinkedIn. I put it up today.
Excellent stuff. Well, hey, Sue. People, please go and connect with Sue. Go and check out these things. Every time you speak to her, I guarantee you'll walk away with one golden nugget that's going to enrich your life. So, Sue, thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks,
everybody,
Max.
go and have an incredible day. And if you're in the Northern Hemisphere, enjoy the heat wave. But be safe out there. Thank you, everybody. Have an incredible day.
Bye-bye.